Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so excited to be able to do this for the first time this spring. We did this several times last semester, and last year, so many of you should be familiar with it, but it is our live online Q&A session brought to you through the Pre-Law Center. Today is an exciting day because it is not just I speaking to you, it's going to be joined by a wonderful attorney and friend of mine, Ms. Rahila Hassan. I'm going to leave her to do her own formal introduction, but we are so thankful that she's able to join us and to share her insights with you all today on our very special "So Now You Want to Go to Law School, What Now?" presentation. Rahila, share with us about yourself.
Yes. Hi, Amber. Thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited to speak about the law school journey. So for some background, my name is Rahila. I graduated law school over a year ago. So I've been practicing formally as an attorney for a year now. Prior to that, I actually went to law school here at SMU. I'm from Dallas originally. I earned a master's in finance from UT Austin, and then went to undergrad before then. I think around the college time that I wanted to go to law school. And so definitely around, in my college years where I also started charting my path towards my legal career and my legal journey. So I practice now as an attorney. I wasn't in courtroom litigation type of work, and we can talk more about the difference, but I was in that type of work, and I just switched over to doing more financial and corporate work. So.
Very exciting. And certainly I do think that there's room to kind of discuss the difference because people might not really fully understand the difference. I think, they're words, that people know and have heard before, but, what it looks like in reality might be different from what it is in actual practice. So first and foremost, let's kind of take a step backwards. I don't know where people might be that are listening to this. So we're going to start at the beginning. I like the idea of law school, but I'm still on the fence. Okay. How do I know if it's for me? I think that's a question that I get quite often. So let's tackle that one first.
Yeah, no, I can imagine that you do. I would say that, the fact that you guys are here listening in on this pre-law conference and you're pretty involved with what Amber does is a really good indicator that you're on the right path of just learning more. Step one would be to talk to as many people as you can. So see if you can connect with as many current law students, people who just graduated law school, and people who are practicing laws, just so you have a realistic understanding of what the industry entails. Step two would be to get involved with as many of these pre-law events and just ask questions. Feel free to, obviously Amber is a great liaison, and you can email practicing attorneys, you can email law students, ask Q&A, just ask us as many questions just so you can understand if it's right for you, what type of work, it really means to be a lawyer, because that's such a broad term. And the more information you have, I think that'll definitely scope, whether you feel like it's right for you.
I love that. I fully agree. The thought of information is power and knowledge is power really rings true in this situation. You're never really going to know if something is for you if you remain blind to what that profession actually looks like. And I think one of the biggest mistakes that anyone can make that would go into this profession would be if you went in with the vision that you had of what a lawyer is in your head rather than investigating what it actually is in reality. Because let me tell you something. What I thought practice of law was when I was 15, when I first kind of decided that this was something that I wanted to do, it's not the same. It's not,
Yeah.
and Rahila, you'd agree with me. There's some glorified moments that do feel very similar to what you might see on TV, but that's maybe 5% of the time.
Yes. So I would follow up too and say step number 3, which I know you've done a great job with the pre-law program too, is do some of the experiential learning. Take as many
Yes.
of the mock trial moot court clubs, get involved as many classes that offer that, or at least any of the professors who were former attorneys and are now teaching at UTA. Just take any of those classes so you can understand, oh, this is sort of similar to what I would be doing if I were to go to law school.
Exactly. Yes, I second that, third that, all of that. And just it's one of the questions that I've gotten, but since it's brought up here, what type of classes should I kind of consider taking? You've mentioned, the mock trial, moot court. Those are classes that we offer at UTA. There we go. Mock trial, moot court. We've got other courses. I'm going to share with them with you now. So write these down if you've got a pen. American Judicial Systems, that's a great introduction to what a lawyer does in the judicial system overall. And I think you get a great snapshot at all stages of judicial process of what it actually entails. So that's a great class, and that's the RCJ 4301. Another class that is excellent, which Rahila will be able to share, is a class that you would be getting in law school, but this is at kind of a fundamentals level. It's U.S. constitutional law. There's two sides to it: fundamental rights and government power. Those are political science classes, polls 4332, polls 3331. Excuse me, 4331, 4332. As I mentioned, you're going to have to take con law in law school, and it's serious. It's very intense. I can only imagine what my life would have been like had I been able to take constitutional law in undergrad. Rahila, did you take it in undergrad?
I had one class offered that was on like First Amendment rights, and I did,
Okay.
yeah, just everything on the First Amendment in college. And I was like, oh, wow.
Well, I bet it helped you in law school though.
Yeah, it definitely
Yes.
primed me. Yeah, it's not just what you read in the Constitution and so much more.
Right. Yeah. I mean, and there's textualism versus, there's all different kinds of ways to interpret, what you're reading. And that's why we have the practice of law to begin with. But certainly those types of classes will give you a leg up. A big leg up in law school. U.S. legal history is another one that looks at Supreme Court precedent and allows you to take a look at some of these cases that are big and historical and get you kind of thinking a little bit more along the lines of Socratic method, which is something that we learn too. And if anybody has questions about what the Socratic method is, this is the time. Don't be shy. You drop it in the chat or raise your hand. We will be happy to answer any questions that you have about anything. And a side note, we're happy to go off script too. So if y'all have a question about something we're not even talking about, happy to answer that too. Last ones I'll mention, these are good for the LSAT. If you want to kind of give yourself a base understanding of how to think and reason and process information for the LSAT, that's Logic, Philosophy 2311, and the Fundamentals of Reasoning, Philosophy 1301. Because at this stage of the game, I know they're changing the LSAT soon. Logic accounts for roughly 67% of the LSAT. So may as well go ahead and get used to the idea that you're going to have to learn how to think this way, think logically and analyze logically. So, but I kind of want to switch to the next question here. I want to be a lawyer, but the thought of giving speeches in court makes me sick. Ugh. Am I choosing the wrong field? What do you think?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. No, you're not choosing the wrong field, because the term attorney, being an attorney, lawyer, whichever you call it, is such a broad profession. There's actually so many different types of law you can practice. When you, unfortunately, maybe due to, TV and movies, the type of lawyers you see the most often are like the courtroom lawyers. But it turns out that's actually only 5%, literally only 5% of majority of what attorneys do. The rest of, and those specific lawyers that happen to go to court, they sue people, they do the settlements and the negotiations, they're called litigators. And the remaining, I would say 95% are transactional attorneys. So they're in their actual law offices, and they facilitate contracts. You're drafting contracts, agreements, business deals, or even, you know, you could maybe think of more, and it doesn't have to be corporate related. It could be within family law, like you're helping with child adoption or divorce cases, or you
Yes.
could be working, yeah. So in any area of law, and 9 out of 10 times you're not going to be like a courtroom lawyer. So if your public speaking skills or your writing skills are something that you're a little, you know, persuasive writing skills are something that you're a little wobbly on, you don't have to worry about that, because there's other skills you could develop more and cater to that type of law.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, along those lines, the major that you choose is not going to determine
Right.
whether or not you're a good lawyer, because we have I have seen probably majors that I never would have even considered would want to go into law. I've worked with music majors, art and art history majors. I've worked with architecture majors. It's very interesting the type of students that do choose this program, this career path. But what ends up happening is they find their niche practice area based on their background. They kind of use that as a platform to jump off into their specific area. So I think the summary is that the law, it doesn't really shape who you are. You are who you are going into it. You're going to still be you. Oddly enough, when I graduated law school, and I shared that with my external circle, they're like, "But you're still the same." Well, yes. Who else would I be? They thought that I would come out with a different personality.
No,
Um,
I totally agree. When I was in law school, I was surprised, I think, by just the sheer diversity of my classmates, in the sense of everyone just had very different backgrounds. Yes, you had of course, a lot of students, you know, straight out of undergrad, straight out of college went into law school, but there were a good number of people who were second career, third career, and much older, who, you know, they had past careers in totally different jobs, and they were like, you know what, I want to go to law school. I had a few friends who were actually veterans. They were in the military, they served, and once they got out, they finished their time, they wanted to go to law school, and they used their military background to really study, yes, more constitutional law or go into more criminal work. I have friends, like I was like an economics / computer science major. I have a lot of friends who are engineering majors. So um, you don't have to be, you know, an English or political science or history major to go to law school. You can honestly have any background. And then law school is just your next step of, okay, what do I want to do with my degree?
yes. Yes. And funny enough, I think I know one of your friends. I'm pretty
Oh
sure
yeah.
you know Mark.
Yes, yes.
Yes, yes, yes. Yep. Um, small world, small world. Okay, so let's see. And I want to make sure that we get to questions that are pertinent and relevant to our audience. So if anybody in our audience has anything that they want to know, or is pressing, I am very happy to shift gears towards any topic at all, because we want to make sure that this is beneficial to you guys. So if you have a question, you can feel free to raise your hand or put the question in the chat, whatever you want to do. But we're happy to make sure that this is relevant to you guys where you are. Let's see. All right. And I'll say that again, because I think we have more people joining us. If you're just joining us, if you have any specific questions that you'd like asked that are not being addressed at the moment, feel free to raise your hands. We'll let you ask it out loud, or you can put it in the chat. But we would love to make sure that we are passing along information that is beneficial to you guys where you are in the process right now. So let's see. Oh, this is one that I get a lot. Okay, so right now I know that I want to go to law school. I'm still kind of new to the process, but just word of caution, my sophomore year and freshman year were both disastrous. Am I totally screwed now for law school? And to be honest, I've gotten this for a number of reasons. As of late, one of the most common reasons that I get now, COVID.
Yeah.
Having to learn virtually and shift gears and do things differently really messed them up. What do we do?
Yes. So COVID definitely took a toll, but the good news is I think, everyone knows that it definitely affected a lot of people. So admissions is very accommodating and understanding related to the COVID issue when it comes to grades. Like I was in law school when the pandemic happened, and similar situation, like a lot of my peers and I, our grades were affected as well. And then we had to tell employers that just like pandemic happened and made every resources so much difficult to get, made it so much harder to study and go to school, and their understanding of that. So I wouldn't worry about that. As for grades as a whole, if your first couple of years, you didn't do as well as you'd like, don't worry, you have your next, junior year, senior year to consider as well. And improve your grades. But even then, when you apply to law school, the admissions committee is looking at your application holistically. So they're looking at, yes, your grades are included in that, you'll have to send your transcript, but also your test scores. So let's say your grades are average, but you get a really high LSAT score. That's great. Like you have a really great package, application to send. Or vice versa, you have high grades, but you did okay on your LSAT. So that's another option, is you can bring up your test score when you study for that. The third thing too is just really showing interest in the law school that you apply to. So doing a lot of relevant legal activities. So maybe you demonstrated a lot of interest when you were younger, you were involved in politics, you took a lot of pre-law type of courses, you talk to a lot of the law schools, like the professors there, the faculty there. So you have a really good understanding of that school and you have a really strong interest towards it. That would also supplement your application. So when you apply, you do have to, submit essays, you do have to submit all your resume, your transcript, everything. So lower grades doesn't affect, whether the rest of your application is stronger, and you can be a strong candidate regardless.
I agree. And so there are several things that can help you overcome it too. So first and foremost, if you went to junior college for a couple of semesters or over the summer, whatever, those transcripts are those that you have to submit along with the transcripts from your degree granting institution. So that's something that will, if you did better at your community college or junior college, that'll help to pad your GPA a little bit for the cumulative number, which is the number that has to be reported to the ABA. Second, you're also able to submit a GPA addendum. And the addendum is one that allows you to explain the circumstances. So, COVID is an easy one. Because of COVID, I was, subjected to a different medium, different platforms, and my professors also struggled to kind of catch, it's not that's the blame game. But if you just are candid and honest without making excuses, it is a lot more well received than they're just making up their reasons in their head for why your grades are lower. If
Yeah,
it's not for COVID, go ahead.
Oh yeah, so I was gonna say the addendum is a really useful, like when you're writing your essays, they'll have a section for like a paragraph or so where you can supplement with an addendum, just explaining all your circumstances. And another addition to that too would be the recommendation letters that you get that are included in your application. If you're just like, I just caught, an unlucky streak, for whatever reason, and you've worked hard, you've shown interest, you have passion for it, make sure your recommenders really highlight that in your application, because it'll show to like a third party who doesn't know you, oh, you have like witnesses, like you have 3 other people confirming that this person is a strong candidate, they're passionate, they're interested in what they do.
Absolutely. And that also goes along with what I was going to say, which is if it's not COVID related, make sure to address the reason behind it. And I love the idea of using your recommenders to supplement exactly why it is that you did not perform to the best of your abilities at that time, but maybe you're a different candidate now today than you were back then. And 9 times out of 10, we are always different people than we were 2 years ago. We are, we change, we grow, we mature. You might have been, the party queen in 2019, but today you are serious, and that's fine. It's just important for you to do those 2 things: show, 1, why this was happening, explain, and then 2, have somebody that's on hand to back up that you are the person that you purport to be. The last thing on GPAs, if you had a pass-fail semester, which we had an issue about it, 18 months worth of pass-fails that we were dealing with, you do want to just remind the committees that it was during COVID, these times. They're going to remember. I mean, everybody that's alive now that's, got a job in admissions knows what was happening. But you'll also find comfort in the fact that LSAC will officially send a letter to any school at all that you apply to, stating that you were a college student during COVID, and that they have to take that into consideration when making a determination of your admissions. So that at least will help. And again, that's from here until forever. If you leave college and come back 10 years later and then apply to law school, there's still going to be a letter attached to your application that says you were in college during COVID, and they must receive that. So that's a bright silver lining, I think, that not a lot of people know, but is really a good thing that works in your favor. So Raheli, did you have anything else to add on this particular point?
I mean, the GPA point is definitely, I know people get very discouraged from it, or they really freak out. I was in a sort of similar position where I didn't feel like my GPA was as high as it could have been compared to other applicants. But just apply anyways. Like, if don't let if you really want to go, don't panic and think, just because you have a lower GPA that is somehow going to stop you. Because it'll work out. And let's say you get into a really, a good law school, you also have the eligibility to transfer after your first year.
Yes.
If it's maybe not the school of your dreams and you want to go somewhere else. But I wouldn't stress too much if you feel one component is lacking versus another. Like, I would just send in your application and just try to make sure that all the points are rounded out pretty well and demonstrate who you are. Because, insane things happen. Like, I've heard of stories where people have just written really compelling personal statements, like the essays you submit, regardless of what their scores were, and they got into some really great law schools. So yeah, I wouldn't let that discourage you or get in your head about any of it.
Good. Well, and you kind of bring up a point. I feel like I'm just piggybacking and rolling with you with everything you say, because it just reminds me of something else. So there is a question on here, LSAT versus GRE. We're going to get to that. But you mentioned something about getting in your head. And I was having a conversation with some wonderful ladies just earlier today about the LSAT and how, 50% of their mission is taking the test, and the other 50% of their mission is just getting out of their head. So you have taken the LSAT a little bit more recently than I have. I still remember it. I was of the camp where this is not that big a deal, because it wasn't beaten into me that this is a big deal. I need to freak out about it. I was telling these girls, freak out about the bar exam. Don't freak out about the LSAT. Right. So what are your thoughts on how to kind of calm those nerves ahead of the LSAT?
Well, I think that LSAT has changed since I took it. My understanding is, like, they have the virtual option now and they've reformatted the exam. So if anything, it might be a little bit easier than when I took it.
No, this is true. This is very true.
Yeah.
So officially they have LSAT and LSAT Flex. I think they're going to go ahead and do away with the LSAT Flex. That was kind of a COVID specific option, but everything is online now. And I think COVID made it to where they're going to keep the ProctorU system up and running. They've spent all this money and time investing in it. And so I think I'm almost certain that gone are the days of having to take it in a room full of other people that haven't showered or bathed, that are coughing and scratching and tapping. I wish I could have taken it under those circumstances, just in my room, by myself or in a hotel or something. But so now they get to take it alone in a hotel or in a room where they're in a private setting, and they're proctored, right? But I think there's still that level of anxiety surrounding the test of, what if I don't do well, or, this is my last attempt before I have to submit my apps. How do I, get over this? So what are your thoughts on how to get past that moment?
So this is kind of unconventional advice, but I mean, before I started law school, I was, I think, a very similar type of candidate, just very anxious. I thought everything, was the most important thing in the world. And if I messed up, my life was over. Now that I've gotten out, and I actually sat, just sat for the bar within the last like 4 or 5 months. So compared to that, the stakes were so different. And the mental space that you're in is so, I just noticed how much I changed and grew over time too. And I just began to realize, like, you do the best that you can. You studied really hard. All your energy and effort, brought you to this moment. And the more you freak out, like, it's game time. If you're gonna freak out right before you take your exam, you're not gonna do well. Like, it's not gonna work out for you, because you're gonna let your anxiety like cloud your judgment. You're gonna freeze up. You're gonna have all that adrenaline anyways from the day of the exam. Don't not sleep, because if you don't sleep, you're gonna have brain fog. You're gonna be on all this caffeine, so you'll be jittery. Just try to calm yourself and be very zen before your exam. And I understand that it feels like you have, the stakes of like the world riding on your shoulders on this one exam, but not really, because exam is just one component. You also can, retake it multiple times, is my understanding, if you feel like you didn't do as well the first time or how you would have liked. And even then, they would still consider your highest score that you took your exam in, so that's okay. And then on top of which, you have your entire application, your transcript, which was determined by your 4 years or however many years of college, your recommendation letters that reflect you as a person and aren't limited to your 1-day test results. How, maybe you woke up that day of your LSAT and for whatever reason, it was just an off day and you just weren't in the right headspace. You can't let those numbers define you and paint an accurate portrayal of who you are as a person, where you have the rest of your application to paint, to really show yourself and shine for the admissions committee. So that's what I would do. I would, I noticed now, like, once I was taking the bar, the headspace I got into up until the exam was, the couple days before the exam, I was like, okay, well, like, no amount of cramming in the next 24 hours, 48 hours is going to change anything. Like, I've worked very hard. I had a strategy. At this point, all I can do is just get myself into a headspace. I like to use sports analogies for this. My dad is really into sports. Like, it's like when you're taking that winning shot, like in an NBA game, like, if you freeze up in that moment, you are not going to make the bucket. That is not the time. If you watch any of the interviews with all these pro players, the ones who are like the high scorers, they tell you, like, they just have to take a deep breath and then they just shoot, because they've had all their practice and all their training leading up to that moment. Like, that is not the time for you to get in your head.
Yeah, you hang loose. That's really it. Hang loose and just let it happen. And I say it all the time that the best thing that the brain can do is perform at its full capacity when it can focus on one thing. If you are focused on your anxiety and trying to focus on something else, it's splitting its attention between your anxiety and what you're actually doing. So do your brain a favor. Anybody that's of legal drinking age, I'm not endorsing having a glass of wine. Do something that relaxes you, not right before the test, but do something like the night before. Go to the movies, go get a massage or a neck rub, something, and relax the day before the exam. It's excellent advice to just do nothing the day before test day, because there's nothing you can do that's going to let you remember everything anyway, if you're trying to shove it in your mind 9 hours before the test. So let your brain relax. Great advice. So just kind of, and again, if there's any questions, drop them in the chat. LSAT versus GRE. So I don't know what experience you have with both. I'm assuming you went to graduate school, they require the GRE, right? So you've taken both at this point?
Yeah. Yes.
Awesome. So share with us a little bit about your interpretation on the difference between LSAT and GRE for the people that have the choice of doing one or the other.
Yeah. So when I was applying to law schools, which was the 2017-2018 cycle, that's when I think it broke on the news, like a few law schools were going to start accepting the GRE. So I think I may have been one of the first few classes where, like, you could opt in to send your GRE score in addition to your LSAT. And I definitely waited. I actually already had a GRE score on file because of a past graduate program that I did. So I had that. I was like, should I retake my GRE? I don't know. Or should I just focus on my LSAT? Ultimately, I submitted my LSAT score and used that. But the distinction is, I think now over the last few years, more and more schools are open to accepting your GRE. So it's like almost 50-50 now, like 50-50 versus everyone accepts the LSAT, and like half the schools only accept LSAT and half the schools are okay with accepting GRE. But everyone will take your LSAT. All law schools will take your LSAT. But not all law schools will take your GRE. So the increase in offering the GRE is so that they could encourage more maybe quantitative focused people. So if you're in a STEM degree, science, technology, engineering, mathematics, or biology, medicine, anything where you feel like you're really a high performer in mathematics and quantitative work, the GRE was for you to showcase that before you go to law school. So you can, and there are opportunities for that because you can go on to do patent law or IP or any type of work after that. But there was an opportunity for those type of students instead of maybe the more traditional liberal arts background who would be more comfortable sitting for the LSAT. Now, as for the difference, not every school is going to accept the GRE. So you should do your research beforehand into what schools you want to apply to, because if you're only going to use your GRE score, you need to make sure that that law school accepts your GRE. Otherwise, you're just kind of wasting time sitting for one exam if that school, if your dream school or something doesn't accept it. Second, obviously LSAT is like, you have logic games, you have and then you have the reading comprehension portion, and I'm not sure.
Logical reasoning.
Okay. So it's very reading focused, and you're applying logic, but in terms of words, not in terms of numbers. Whereas obviously on the GRE, you have, yes, your verbal components, but you also have like your mathematics components. And so you just need to be comfortable with, I think it's like up to algebra level math. And if you can do that on your GRE. So those are a few of the considerations. They're both, I think now they're both single day tests. You can just study for them and get them done. Take a look at the material beforehand. I will say that whereas the GRE is supposed to be testing you on your existing like college knowledge, I think, which is like the general baseline of what you know, and maybe a little bit extra. LSAT is like not really testing you on pre-existing knowledge. It's testing you more on how you think. So you would have to spend some time actually studying and preparing for the LSAT, so you get comfortable with the type of questions they ask and the type of sections there are and the pacing of the exam, because it's not going to be intuitive information that you've already taken in a class previously. It's going to be, they're going to test you on stuff that you'll just have to practice and realize what your strengths are and weaknesses are in that department. So I think it just depends on the student. They need to do their research, figure out what universities, so that'd be step one, do your research, figure out what schools you want to apply to, figure out if they accept your GRE, and then you can take a look at the type of sample. Every website has 5 or 6 sample questions. Take a look at GRE questions versus LSAT questions and see for yourself which ones you think you're doing better on. Or even take like a mock test, because there's free tests online, and see which one you like in a diagnostic, which one you naturally scored higher on. Maybe you scored higher on one or the other and you're like, okay, you know what? I already scored 20 points higher on this exam. I don't have that much more to refine in order to get a really good score. So.
Yeah, and I that's a perfect breakdown of the two tests. One is a knowledge-based test, one is a skills-based test. So lean, whichever way you lean is whichever way you should go. But I'm going to add this caveat here. Law schools, like she said, all law schools accept the LSAT, only a portion of them accept the GRE, but everyone is a once LSAT, always LSAT. So let's say you take the LSAT and you've taken it officially, you didn't like your score. So I'm going to go ahead and just take the GRE. They're going to always defer back to that LSAT score, and it's not going to go away. So once you commit to taking the LSAT, that's your choice. You just need to try and follow through and take it again if you want to improve your score. So it's always good advice to think carefully about which one you actually want to pursue. And, each test has its own benefits. The LSAT, like we said, is widely accepted. The GRE is not as widely accepted, but you can take it a lot more times in the year than you can the LSAT. LSAT, believe it or not, it used to only be 4 times a year, period.
I think,
Range
yeah,
now
and
it's a lot more. I think it's almost they're up to maybe 8 times a year now.
oh
It's
wow.
yeah, it's pretty good now. But the
Yes,
but the
I remember.
GRE is, oh, what'd you say?
Oh yeah, I remember like when I was sitting for the LSAT, it was only offered 3 times a year. So it's like if you that
Yeah,
was the stress too, was like, if I don't do as well as I want on the LSAT this time around, I'll have to wait months until I can take it again. But you're right,
yeah.
like GRE is so much more wide because you can use
I think
your
it's like once
GRE
a week
for.
almost, or several times a week even.
Yeah, because it's applicable for almost any grad program. So it's like
Mhm.
almost everyone around the country is eligible to take the GRE. So it's just offered all the time, whenever. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, for the people that are looking for more information on both, for LSAT, you're going to go to lsac as in cat.org, which if you want to go to law school, I guess we kind of need to talk about that. LSAC is the place to be, whether you take the LSAT or not, but LSAC is going to be the place where you register for the LSAT for sure. And if you
Uh,
want to take the GRE, you go to ets.com.
yes, I was gonna say my understanding though too is because there's less people who use the GRE approach to apply. Um, they actually have like higher standards for the GRE. Like you need to, I think you actually need to get like
Yes.
need to perform well, because if you're opting to take the GRE over the LSAT, like you need to prove to them that like, yeah, this exam is better catered to me. This is why like I'm scoring so high.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yes, and I second that. They look a little bit more discriminately with your GRE score than with your LSAT. Um, Not to say that they're more forgiving. Don't mistake that logic. They're not more forgiving of the LSAT. They're just a little bit harder on the GRE people. But that doesn't mean that it's necessarily a disadvantage. I just want to say that too.
Yeah.
Uh, just got to work hard on both. Um, Great. I'm glad that we got a chance to touch on that. So let's say I have, already decided that I want to do law school. I've already kind of started looking into the LSAT. I really do want to start looking into law schools and doing my research on law schools. I just don't even really know where to start, right? How do you start looking at law schools and once you start figuring out, which one is what and situated where, like how do I possibly wrap my head around where I should go?
Yeah, so that's a great question, probably like the biggest question to consider. Just for some background, so as Amber mentioned earlier, there is a overarching body that governs your law school admissions. They're called the LSAC, so Law School Admissions Council, I think.
Mhm. Yes.
Yes, so they're going to be the website you're going to create an account on, and you'll upload all your scores and your applications to there. But what they're also really good for is I think they have some law school research on their site. So if you're like a college student and you're looking for preliminary information, like I don't know where to go, what law schools are good for what,
Mhm.
um, their website is a good place to start. Another thing I would do is well, there's a few things. So one thing is many law schools are ranked, and those rankings are, could be due to multiple reasons. Sometimes it's like what school gives a lot of scholarship or has a huge endowment, what schools have really good XYZ programs, where they're located, etc. There's a lot of factors that are involved with law school rankings. But there, I'm sure you guys are familiar. US News is the main ranking that does the law school rankings. So you can just go on Google right now, type in like US News law school rankings, and they'll show you the most recent annual law school rankings. And as you can imagine, the top 20 to 50 schools are pretty competitive to get into. Top 10, 15 schools are extremely competitive to get into. They're like the top in the country. Now, when you see those rankings, you might be wondering, like, why is this school ranked so high? Like, what makes, University of Texas such a good law school as opposed to somewhere else? Where, in Texas, UT is yes, I think the top ranked law school here. And then that's when you can start doing your research. So I would look, the rankings are a good place to start initially and just kind of get your feet wet and understand how do the law schools place next to each other. Fine. Next thing you want to do is like you want to look up the specific school. So you're going to look up like, let's say like I went to SMU Law School here in Dallas. I'm going to look up SMU Law. I'm going to start looking at like what programs they offer, what city they're located in. If any of you have a geographic preference, like I wanted to practice in Texas, so I looked at law schools in Texas. So yes, and then I like wanted to see how how much do they generally offer in scholarships. So all of this is going to be on each law school's website. It's when you're going to go and type in whatever law school you want. They're going to have like an admissions or potential candidate, potential applicant page, and they're going to have all this information. And they'll also tell you, so as we mentioned earlier, there's different tracks you can take in the legal profession. So you can be a corporate lawyer, you can be a court lawyer, which would be a litigator. So or you can be, you really want to work in government and do public interest related work. So all these different legal programs, every law school is going to have like some programs that are really good in that and some programs that are like, okay, like in that. So you want to, like, let's say you have an interest in doing, you want to be this courtroom attorneys, like you want to be like how they are in Suits or like Law and Order, like you want to go to court and just practice that. Well, you can also narrow your search or your rankings on Google by like top litigation programs in the country or top mock trial or moot court team, law schools that have the best mock trial moot court teams. And you can reverse engineer that way. So my understanding is like University of Denver in Colorado has probably one of the top litigation programs in the country. So those are like good preliminary ways. So you can figure out like if you have an inkling like what type of lawyer you want to be or what type of practice area you want to do, you can just get on Google and start narrowing that way. Another thing you can do is you can just go on US News and look at their rankings and try to understand why they'll explain to you like why the rankings are this way.
Yes.
Why is this school number 12 and why is this school number 48? Another thing you can do is just reach out in your community. So let's say like you're in the state of Texas. Every state has like a defined list of how many law schools they have. So Texas has 8, I believe.
10.
Oh, do they have 10 now? Okay, so there's 10 in Texas, and you can just look up, by ranking, okay, which ones are the best in Texas and why. The thing is too, once you start doing your research, you'll start seeing the admissions criteria. So you'll start seeing, oh, like, this law school definitely has higher tuition than this law school, but this law school does offer more financial aid, so that's helpful. Another thing you'll see is like, oh, this school has a really high threshold for LSAT and for GPA, whereas this school seems much more within my range of, whatever scores and numbers I have. So that's another way to go about it. I think there's another website that I use to help me with my research. I believe it's called 7Sage, and I'll look into it, but they had posted all the admission statistics for any law school. So you can look up, let's say Columbia Law School, and look at their like admission statistics for the past X amount of years. And they like would create like a graph where they would show like LSAT score by GPA and like kind of show you where the students placed on that and the average number of students that they were accepting. So you could also like, let's say you have your score or you have your GPA and you want to know like how high of a LSAT score do I need to get into Harvard or Columbia or whatever law school you want to go to. And you can use those admissions graphs to see like, oh, I need to target a 173 or a 170 on my LSAT in order to get into that type of law school. And then lastly, so I gave you 3 ideas. So last thing I would do is just reach out to actual lawyers, and you can use LinkedIn, or you can use, I don't know if like the pre-law program has a contact book or alumni list. Just reach out to practicing attorneys or current law students and ask them about things that they liked at at the law school they went to, and things that they disliked, or where they, if the school they went to was like their dream school, or they wish they went somewhere else, and why. So that's a really good way of understanding like the true like culture of the law school. Is it, very competitive to the point that you feel burned out and stressed and anxious all the time? Or is it a very supportive and collaborative environment? Is it very homogenous type of people, or is it like, do they have more diverse students and offer a lot of diversity programs, which would, make you feel more comfortable at the school? So
Excellent. And it's so funny, the most recent, the latest thing that you said about diversity versus homogenous culture. We just had an event last week where one of the students, I won't share which school she's at, but she said that the place where she is after coming from UTA, which is incredibly diverse, is the least diverse place that she's ever been in her life. She said that was
okay.
kind of culture shock. And she's not a minority, actually. She says it was just culture shock to just not have anybody else in the room that was a different face. Um, so yeah, I mean, if those things are important to you, you've got to look at that. The big thing that I always tell people is to keep an open mind, especially, when you before you start getting into LSAT and before you start looking at GRE and all these other things that are kind of stress inducers. The process of looking into what type of law school that you want to go to or what location you want to go to is really kind of a magical experience because so
Yeah.
many things are possible. I I I think you guys know the Legally Blonde reference. I if y'all don't, forget y'all. Like y'all were just way too young to be in college. But that was my that was what kind of helped to inspire me to think, it's really possible. Because if this girl could get into Harvard Law, certainly, I could go wherever I wanted to go. The sky is the limit.
Yeah.
I think having that kind of inspired approach when doing the research for your law schools is really the way that you want to go. And you don't want to limit yourself. First and foremost, I know we all want to stay as close as we can to mom and dad. They will be fine. They love you. They'll be fine. And, for the ones that say mom and dad and, family are completely opposed to you going off to law school, again, I submit they will be fine with the straightest face imaginable. They will make it. They'll survive. And in 3 years, when you're finished, you show them that law license, they'll forgive you. It's okay. Um, follow scholarship dollars. And I'm gonna get Rahila's perspective on this too, because I think I really tend to ask this of any speaker that we've had because I love getting their perspective and getting multiple opinions in front of the students. But Raheel, I'm gonna tell you my question, and then I'm gonna come back to my question here in a second. My question to you is scholarship versus ranking. What's more important? But um, I want you guys to keep an open mind when it comes to scholarships and rankings and try and find the best combination possible because sometimes, you might break the bank trying to get to X law school and then, this law school offers you a full scholarship and you would have been, the top student because they're really targeting you. And so you'll have to really decide what works out best for you, but it really doesn't even come into play if you've got a closed mind and are thinking, I'm only going to go to the school that's, within 15 miles of my house. The other thing that I will always tell you is don't ever apply to just one school. You're literally putting all your eggs in one basket and you don't know if it's going to be a competitive year. You don't know if they have raised their admission standards and you would have made it last year, but you don't make the cut this year. Or they will offer you zero in scholarship dollars because they're pulling you off the wait list 1 week before school starts. And now you're going into debt when you truly didn't even have to. You could have applied in 6 other places and gotten some type of financial aid offer. So yeah, never, ever, ever put all your eggs in one basket. But as far as other research portals, I do want to make sure to plug the UTA pre-law website, which is uta.edu/pre-law. You can find all kinds of information on different law schools, rankings, GPA medians, LSAT medians, whether they take the GRE, the LSAT, both, whether they have a part-time or full-time program or both. So all of those are really beneficial, and you can find that on our website as well. But I do also want to leave you with two other resources. So Rahila, the program that you described, I haven't seen Seven Sages, which that's really cool to know about Seven Sage, but there's another website called howicompare.com. And it is very, very similar to what you've described, where I think though they allow you to plug in your GPA, your LSAT, and your major. And it shows you what other students with a similar major, similar GPA, similar LSAT got into the school that you're trying to get into, or how many of those students that they let in previous cycles. That's been a pretty useful tool for my students in the past. Another really cool tool is explorejd.org. Explorejd.org. It's a really cool tool provided by Access Lex. And what's awesome about this tool is it allows you to kind of do a self-diagnostic and report all kinds of information about yourself. It's less than 5-minute survey. And then at the conclusion of it, it shows you, it's almost like a dating profile. No, I've not used a dating profile. I'm happily married. Love you, husband. It's like a dating profile, and it sets you up with the schools that match your personality as you purported it. I mean, it's really cool. If you say, I hate cold weather, well, there, you're not going to North Dakota for law school, right? I mean, it's really cool. It's very intuitive. And that's a great resource to utilize. So I think we are running at the end of our time. Does anybody have a question before I pose this last question to Rahila? And don't be shy. Oh, she is so pretty.
Oh, well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, she is. So Rahila, my last question to you is scholarship dollars or ranking? What's most important in your book and why? And when picking a law school?
So this might be a long answer, so I don't know if you have a hard cutoff, but bear with me to give me a couple minutes over. But that's a really tough question, and I think it really depends on the person. I was definitely a rankings driven person when I was first applying. I've just always been a very competitive person, very ambitious. So I was very rankings driven. But then you think about like the cost of, so on average, most law students, I mean, this is just their reality. Most law students and most med students as well, and most people get their MBA, like this, just most grad programs, but especially law school, a lot of people graduate with debt from the, because they had to take student loans for, to pay for law school. And I mean like debt that unfortunately you're paying for a good few years, like almost, I think the average number is like 100K, but hopefully less. So that was definitely like something everyone is thinking about. And, the ideal situation would be you get into the top school and they offer you scholarship and then you're like happy. But unfortunately, that only happens to such a select few number of students, but that doesn't mean you shouldn't try, like obviously apply. You might be one of those people, you never know. But chances are statistically, it's probably just not going to work out that way. Now you get into a really great school, but you have to pay a full ride. And on top of which, you have to pay full for tuition. And then on top of which, you would have to pay your housing, you have to pay miscellaneous costs for your textbooks and other expenses, because unfortunately the legal like when you're in school, your law textbooks, all these other things you have to sign up for when you start getting enrolled in the legal profession to start adding up. So unless you're in a position financially to pay for all of that, go for it. But if you're not, then that's something you need to start keeping track of, because the bills will keep adding up. Now, you get scholarship from a lower ranked school, fine, take it, because you're going to end up financially in a better position once you graduate compared to most law graduates in the country who are, what happens is when people have this debt, they're forced to get very intense jobs. And I'm sure you guys have heard stories of some law firms that work, young lawyers, like when you're straight out of law
school. Billable Yeah.
Exactly. You're working 60 to 80-hour weeks, if not more, just to get a paycheck that you're giving to pay off your loans. And they're not jobs that I think a lot of my classmates are passionate about or they enjoy, or a lot of them were like, this isn't really why I went to law school, but I'm just going to do this for a few years until I pay off my loans and then pursue a degree or pursue a career that I really want to do, you know? So it's like you kind of have to put your dreams on hold, your passions on hold, and have to sacrifice even more once you're out of law school in order to pay off your loans. So you may start hearing a lot of people say like, no, a top ranked unit law school is, you know, the best thing in the world. I don't think it really, I think wherever you go to law school, the opportunity is what you make of it. So because you could be at a top ranked law school, but like towards the bottom of your class or the middle of your class, you're still not going to get the same opportunities that the top of your class is going to get, even though you're at a quote unquote better ranked law school. You would still have to fight every single day to prove yourself at that school, which is what you could have done at a lower ranked law school as well. But now at least your finances are covered. So you have more opportunity to pursue a passion or a career that you really wanted to do. I have a lot of friends who went into law school because they were more interested in, let's say, like, I would, for lack of a better word, like public interest or social justice work. They really, but as many of you may not know, like those, you know, helping homeless or working with or volunteering in certain committees or helping, like, you know, foster children, all these jobs which you want to be a champion for, they don't pay that well. And so you can't pursue those jobs when you're straight out of school. You have to put a like pause on your dreams because you have to get a job that pays your bills.
Right.
So the last thing I'll say is that if you get scholarship and you get into multiple schools and some schools are not giving you as much money as you want, one trick is you can always leverage your existing scholarship with the school you want and try to get them to increase their scholarship that they're giving you. Let's say this school is giving you like 50K and you're like, oh my God, this school's only giving you 10K, but you really like them. Make a good relationship with the 10K school and then tell them like, hey, this other school is giving me 50K. And like, unfortunately, I just can't go to your school unless you try to offer me more financial aid. You can negotiate that way with the admissions committee once you're in, about trying to bring up the amount of scholarship that they give you. And then hopefully you'll get into both your dream school and have money that pays your expenses.
Absolutely. I think you summed it up really well. I think the only thing I'll add to that is the notion that you have to do well, like top 10, top 15, top 20% of your class in order to really have all doors. And I mean, that's big law all the way down to government or whatever work is true and real. So with that being said, sometimes it is more beneficial to forego the higher ranked school where you probably have to claw a little bit harder because everybody is amazing, and go to a lower ranked school where you are amazing and you might probably be at the top and have more opportunities available to you. So with that, I think we handled a lot of questions. We did a lot, and I think the audience kind of really absorbed that. I'm really grateful for the attendance. And if you guys have any questions, now is the time to ask. Otherwise, we're about to close us out. Going once, going twice. All right. Well, Rahila, thank you so much. I'm so grateful that we got a chance to snag a little bit of your time this afternoon. This was really beneficial, and thank you so much for providing your wisdom and insight. I know that everybody that views this is really going to appreciate it. And just to close this out, if you need advising, you can reach out at prelaw@uta.edu. This is what we do. We work with you on application pieces. We work with you on questions of how to negotiate. We work with you on how to really pick the law schools, how to help with the LSAT, help with the GRE. We have resources. You know, if you can't pay for some of the resources yourselves, sometimes we're able to connect you with people that can provide those resources or scholarship opportunities. So please don't be a stranger. Pre-law is where it's at. Rahila, I hope I'm not speaking out of turn, but if they want to reach you directly, are they able to do that?
Yeah, I was actually about to say, first of all, Amber, thank you so much for having me, and thank you
Yes.
all for listening. I really hope you appreciated it, and it was useful. Give me 1 second. Let me pull this up and I'll drop this link below. You're all welcome to email me, connect with me on LinkedIn, which is what I primarily use to just like connect with people, and I'm like dropping it in the chat. There we go. Yeah. So you guys can
Perfect.
all just add me on LinkedIn, shoot me a message, or you can reach out to Amber for my contact information. And I try to get coffee with some pre-law students, advise you guys. You can always ask me for help with any step of your pre-law journey, and I'm happy to help.
Absolutely. Well, awesome, awesome. And thank you, Rahila. Thank you guys for listening. And I guess until our next Q&A, which is happening next month, watch your pre-law newsletter for more information. We'll see you guys soon.